Joining me today is Rashim Mogha. She's the founder of eWow, Empowered Women of the World. She is a thought leader, a best-selling author, and a popular speaker at global conferences in technology and business. Rashim has held leadership roles at companies like Skillsoft, VMware, Amazon Web Services, and Oracle. We're really excited to have her join us today. So without further ado, I will let you take it over.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm excited to be here and speak to the audience today. My name is Rashim Mogha, pronouns she and her. Feel free to connect me with me on LinkedIn or on other social media channels. That's why the information is there for you. Stephanie actually provided a great introduction. My career journey started off as a Java developer about 20 years ago. And since then, I've held leadership positions at companies like NIIT, VMware, Amazon Web Services, Oracle, Automation Anywhere, and now at Skillsoft, where I lead a $100 million business. This slide shows all the achievements, like the books that I've written, the courses that I have on LinkedIn Learning and other places, the awards that I've won, the speaking engagements that I've done. What it doesn't show is how many times I had to deal with conscious and unconscious bias being a woman in technology and as a woman leader. It also doesn't show numerous times I dealt with self-limiting beliefs myself and dealt with imposter syndrome, and how many times I was passed over for promotion or that next level of leadership role because one of my peers, who happened to be a man, was promoted based on his potential, while I, based on my actual successes, couldn't even make that mark. So we're going to talk about this today, and we are also going to talk about what we can do as women leaders, because it's not having enough women in the leadership role is a socioeconomic issue. It's not. It requires a multi-pronged approach to be able to address it. But there's so much power that we have in our own hands to change the trajectory of a career. And that's what I'm going to focus on. But as I talk about, as I started speaking about the conscious and unconscious bias that I had to deal with, I realized that my story wasn't unique. And there were so many other women leaders who felt the same way. And that is also clear as you start looking at the data sets that are available out there. For example, this McKinsey report that was released in 2022 is eye-opening, right? If you look at percentage point change from 2017 and you look at these numbers, you would say, geez, we are improving. We're making progress. But then you look at these numbers. Right? Women of color, 5% in C-suite. Women altogether, 26% in the C-suite. And that's where you start thinking about the gap that is there. Despite all the efforts to increase women representation over the last few years, women leaders are still underrepresented, especially in the VP, SVP, and C-suite levels. Now, here is the thing. Let's look at some of these stats. Women leaders are 2x more likely as men leaders to be mistaken for someone junior. If you ever have dealt with it, please raise your hand. I want to hear from you, because that is something that I have dealt with. If there is a woman leader and there is a team member that she brings along and that team member happens to be a man, 2x times it's assumed that the man is the leader and the woman reports into him or is a subordinate. Have you ever dealt with that? If yes, please raise your hand using the function. Yes, thank you. I see the number going up steadily. 40% of women say that their DEI work isn't acknowledged at all. Let's talk about this a little more, because this is important. As women leaders, we are expected to lead diversity initiatives, be mentors for emerging leaders, give back to the community, advocate for women leaders, but we are also we also have to manage our career, and we also have to manage home front because we are perceived caregivers for our children, our parents, and people in our family. And when you combine this all, imagine the pressure that women leaders have to deal with. And that's why 43% of the women leaders experience burnout compared to 31% of the men or their men counterpart at the same level. And then if you look at the economic slowdown that's happening right now, it's impacting women disproportionately. And let's dive a little bit deeper into that. Women in tech are 65% more likely to be laid off than men, because traditionally there is a perception that women are not technologists, women are not good with math and science, and that unconscious bias or conscious bias plays into how the layoffs happen and how the layoff list is decided upon. Now, 45% of those were laid off in recent tech jobs were women. And this is interesting. If we go back to the previous slide, at the entry level, there were about 46% or 48% of women. You combine those 48%, and then you start looking at how many were laid off. If 45% of those were laid off, how many women are actually left in the workplace? And then let's talk about pink tax. I know I pay more for my clothes, more for my hair, more for the skincare products as compared to the men in my family. And then there is also a perception that women have to show up differently as men. They need to be prim and proper. A man can show up with gray hair. There's still a stigma attached, especially in the Bay Area, around the aging population and how you think about it. And that all combines to how much we have to pay for the products that we consume. Now, on one hand, our representation is low. We are being disproportionately impacted. And on the other hand, we are paying so much more for showing up at work. And combine those two together and see where we are as women leaders. And that's why it becomes really important for all of you as women leaders and allies to those women leaders to start thinking about things differently and putting things in the perspective of how we can change, how we can use a multi-pronged approach to change the situation. Now that you have seen these stats, Stephanie, if we can please open up the poll to see how many of the people in our audience were aware of these stats.
All right, so we've got that poll right there on your screen, so you just click right on it. Give everyone a minute or two to figure out where their mouse is, rearrange their windows, find the poll, click those answers. So far, it's looking about 75%. We're somewhat aware of the numbers. I will give you just another second to finish. Oh, we have a 100% response rate.
That is awesome.
Amazing. All right, so I'm going to show these results there. And you can see, so about 74% were somewhat aware, but a lot of us were not fully aware.
And this is interesting, Stephanie. I was aware of some of these stats as I started putting the talk together for today. As I connected the dots, I realized how big the impact was. Like, how often do we combine the data sets with how we are being disproportionately impacted right now in terms of cents that we earn on a dollar or the layoffs that are happening, and then combined with the pink tax, for example, and how it amplifies the situation and puts us at an economic disadvantage as compared to men. So some of the challenges that I have dealt with and some of the women leaders whom I talk to often in my network have dealt with is, first and foremost, is access to hard jobs. At the level where we operate, especially at senior director, VP, SVP, and C levels, none of the jobs that we want to go after are actually advertised. They are all filled through the network. And women leaders, because we don't have a group of sponsors and a group of leaders that would vouch for us or a strong network, do not get access to these hot jobs. We don't even know when the job was in the market and when it got snagged by somebody else. And sometimes we look at people in those roles and we say, geez, like I wish that role was open. I would have liked to put my name in the hat and see where it went. So leadership opportunities are also not created equally. I am currently, besides being the founder of EVA, I'm also an SVP in a public company, and I lead a multi-million-dollar business. If I look at the job description that was actually put out for that job, I doubt that any woman leader would have applied for it. It had phrases that made women leaders uncomfortable in terms of what was expected of them and how it will impact their personal life to even have the courage to apply for that job. So leadership opportunities not being created equally, not being marketed equally for women, and not having that equity built in really takes away from the opportunities that are available to women leaders. And then imposter syndrome. There's actually data set. KPMG did this study that found out that 75% of the female execs actually experience imposter syndrome. To be completely candid, I was actually, every time I take on a new job, there is a little bit of imposter syndrome that creeps in. And I've found out ways and strategies to address that. But imagine if you did not have that kind of support system, or you did not have that background where you can address it quickly, what would it do to your success if you're constantly not showing up in meetings as your real authentic self because you're dealing with imposter syndrome? And then 47% of the exec women's never expected to reach this level of success that they have achieved. And this is interesting because as the founder of EVO, I get to talk to a lot of C-level women in the C-suite. And there's so many times I hear this phrase that I was there at the right time, right place, or I've just been so lucky to find people who have helped me with my success. There is so much of they hesitate, and there's so much of resistance to actually attributing it to the skill set that these women leaders have and the fact that they have been successful leaders. And that's why they have demonstrated success, and that's why they're in the positions where they are. And then work-life harmony. Let's just talk about this. It's perceived, women leaders are perceived as natural caregivers. They're expected to lead DEI programs. They're expected to give back, pull other women up. And that leads to higher burnout. And there's so many times when I coach women leaders, they have this guilt of prioritizing career over home, and nobody should have that guilt. I also draw from my personal experience over here. Obviously, I was in India when I took on my first job. I was 19 years old. I was interviewing for this position. And while I was interviewing, the leader who was interviewing me, and this person happened to be a VP of the organization, he said to me, Rashim, when are you planning to get married? And I thought that was a weird question in a job interview for a 19-year-old. And I said, how does it matter? And he said to me, I want to know that you're serious about this job if I'm going to move you forward. And I don't want to give this job to somebody who's going to get married tomorrow and leave this job. So I was shocked when I heard that. And I asked him, how many times do you ask that same question to men who apply for that job? And that's when he caught his unconscious bias. But that is so prominent. Another example that's top of mind for me, and this is, thank you, Veronica. Yes, so many other women have the same experience. And that was 20 years ago while I was in India. I'll give you a recent example. About 6 years ago, this was at a Fortune 100 company that I worked for. And I hired a woman leader on my team who had experience as a high school computer science teacher, but came with excellent background on cloud computing, and then decided to have a kid, take a break. During that break, she took multiple certifications, proved herself in technology field, created apps, and then interviewed for this job. And when I decided to hire her, I had to give justification in terms of why I was hiring a new mother for that job. And by the way, the person who asked for that justification was another woman leader. So you might think, and before that, I would think that, in a country like India, which is predominantly patriarchal society, people have a lot of bias against women. That comment, maybe I can justify that. But how would you justify that similar kind of comment coming from a person, another woman leader? And I told my woman leader at that time that I was hiring this candidate for the skill set that she brought in and the experiences that she brought in. And her family situation, personal situation did not matter to me. It's needless to say that I was able to hire that person, and she is a rock star. She's an awesome rock star. So then let's talk about, okay, I'm moving too fast. I clearly did not do a good job over here in terms of controlling my mouse. But let's talk about what challenges have you witnessed as women leaders. I would love to hear from you. And while you're doing that, please use chat to put those in here. While you're doing that, I'm going to review all the comments that I see over here.
I think we have a few people in here saying that they have recently been asked when they're planning to start a family.
Yeah.
As recently as this morning, Danny says.
Wow. Yes, I've heard that too. I should actually write down about that experience that I had. Yes, being mansplained to an area of my own expertise. I'll give you a very recent example. I am an exec sponsor for the BIPOC ERG that we have in our company. And when I was being appointed the exec sponsor for that ERG, there was actually a male leader who actually tried to tell me how important DEI initiatives were, despite knowing that I run the EVA initiative and how active I am in the DEI space. And it was interesting for me to see how he was trying to build up the case for DEI initiatives without understanding my background.
Yeah, we have a lot of
comments. Being asked why my hair isn't done. Yes. I actually have a post on LinkedIn that went viral where I talked about gray hair and conference t-shirts being okay at work. So I feel you. Interesting. I started the job and got married 2 years later, and the hiring manager said, I didn't know you were getting married when we were interviewing. Wow. Being told to wear more makeup. Yes, Veronica, I have seen that, and it's less prevalent, I think, in the United States. But when I was visiting and I was in Japan for business reasons, there was a woman leader who would actually instruct new candidates, new women leaders who were onboarded into the company, especially the sales teams, to wear makeup properly as they were having customer meetings. And I was shocked to hear that. Being told to smile. Wow. Okay, this is very interesting conversation. I would like to come back to this, but let's move forward and talk about some of the things that we can do as women leaders. There's always an element of what can I do better while others are trying to help me out. And the first and the foremost thing that I realized very early on in my leadership journey was that I need to know what my USP is. what is my superpower? What is that one thing that sets me apart from others? Because in today's day and age, you cannot say, I excelled in my current role, and that's why I'm a fit for my next role. There are 1,000 people competing for those roles. And that's why it's important to know what is unique in you that sets you apart. The word superpower for me energizes me. Like it has so much energy. It's not about skill set. It's about what would make you shine in the world. And I was lucky early on in my career. I had somebody actually come to me and tell me what my superpower was. And my superpower is make it happen. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But I had to go the reverse route of decodifying what make it happen meant so that I could use that superpower. So for me, make it happen means landing into an ambiguous situation, looking at identifying what the problem is, finding a strategy to address that problem, and then operationalizing that strategy so that my team can execute on it. And that's my superpower. I can walk into a conversation, and in an ambiguous situation, I can find what the problem is. I can dive deeper and create a strategy and then operationalize that strategy. I do a lot of identify your superpower workshops. And I remember I was doing this workshop for LinkedIn one time. And it was a good group of male as well as female leaders. While male leaders were very quick to identify multiple superpowers that they had, and I distinctly remember one of them who had 4 pages of every possible leadership quality that he had listed as his superpower. Women leaders really found it hard to identify what their superpower was. And this is where imposter syndrome also comes into play, where we think we're not good enough, or, oh, this is something that I just do. It's not something special. So I would like you to really spend time identifying what your superpower is. Now, superpower is traditionally, how do you go about finding this? It's traditionally something that you love doing, right? I love getting into messy situations and figuring out what the problem is and creating strategies. But some people are great collaborators. Some people are great negotiators, and that's your superpower. Some people can create beautiful strategies. Some people have a knack for marketing initiatives or social media. Nowadays, people are great content creators. So identify what your superpower is. If you do not know what your superpower is and you are finding it hard, go back and ask your leaders who appreciate you for a job well done, or your colleagues or your coworkers who have appreciated you in the past or sent you kudos email. Go back and ask them, what do you really appreciate? A very good way of doing that is if somebody says, thank you for all your effort, or thank you for your hard work, or you made this project successful, say a nice thank you to them. Don't attribute it to the team. That's another mistake that we make. We put it it was teamwork. Be gracious, accept that acknowledgement and that appreciation, and then ask them, I would like to know what is one thing that I did that made all the difference in your mind. And that is a very good way to identify your superpower, because once you ask this question multiple times to multiple different people, you will see that there is a pattern. And that pattern would lead you to your superpower. Another way to do it is to actually, if you're shy and if you don't feel comfortable yet asking others, look at last 4 or 5 projects that you have done or completed successfully. Identify the skills that were required, and then you will see a pattern emerge from there. And that's your superpower. Now, knowing what your superpower is important, but it's equally important to know how to flaunt your superpower. So let's talk about that. Many times when I walk into situations, and sometimes leaders would say, Rashim, this is really important, and we really need to get this done. I would just say, I will, because I have the make it happen superpower. And that gets people curious, and people want to know, well, what's that? Tell me more about that. And that gives me an opportunity to talk a little bit about my superpower. But then what starts happening is your superpower starts registering in people's mind. And now every time they see me, they see make it happen. And they know that I will be able to achieve it. So that's how you should think about it. Superpower should not be a secret that's tucked away in a jewelry box somewhere. It should be something that everybody should know and everybody should relate to, in terms of relate to you and to be able to identify you as somebody who is excellent at collaborating or negotiating. So quick raise of hands over here in terms of how many of you have actually done this exercise and know what your superpower is, and you share your superpower out in public with your leaders, with your coworkers, with your team. Yay, Veronica. So proud of you. Madeline, awesome. We still have quite a few of you in the audience today who haven't shared your superpower with your leaders, with your coworkers, with your network. So I would highly encourage you to do that, and feel free to reach out to me after this session if you want more details on how to go about it. Okay, now once you have identified your superpower, next, build your brand. So build your brand, and it's important, and there's a reason why it comes after identifying your superpower, because your superpower should reflect in how you're building your brand. So your brand is important. Your brand is not the company that you work for and not the title that you hold. So many times we walk into a conversation and we say, hi, I'm Rashim Mogha. I'm SVP at this and this company. And then the conversation just goes in terms of what do I do for the company and what kind of business do I lead. Interestingly enough, the next year when I change my job, the conversation becomes, hi, I'm Rashim Mogha. I am the CEO at this and this company. And did you notice what happens with this? My identity keeps changing as I change jobs and as I acquire new titles. But that's not who I am. There's so much more to me when you start thinking about me as an individual. And that's why building your brand becomes so important. Now, there's so many times women leaders would come to me, the ones whom I coach and also once I'm sponsoring, they would come to me and say, Rashim, this is not the right time for me to build my brand. I'm in between jobs. I have so much going on in my personal life. I have, I'm taking care of my parents. I'm taking care of my kids. My husband's job is so stressful, or my partner's job is so stressful. There's just one thing that I have to say to them. Your personal brand is your responsibility. This is one thing that you can't outsource. You can outsource cooking the food, taking care of the house. You can even find childcare, but you cannot outsource building your brand. It is your brand. It's reflective of you, and you really need to work on it. And this becomes important, especially as you start rising up in the career, because now the jobs are not advertised. People know you only through your network. And if you don't have a brand and if you don't have your superpower out there, people would not know you. That means you'll never be approached for those hot jobs, high-profile jobs that you're wanting to get to. So how can you build your brand? You can build your brand. You can start small. You can start small by getting more active on LinkedIn and making a conscious effort to connect with 2 or 3 leaders in your industry outside your company to exchange ideas and show your worth to them. You could also start blogging and writing to share your insights. You can volunteer. There's so many ways of building your brand, but this is something that you have to prioritize. You cannot put it on the back burner. You cannot just create a LinkedIn profile and forget all about it and just expect that things would magically open for you. Building your brand is a living, breathing, constant opportunity that you have to have to just embark on and continue doing so. So how many of you have consciously spent time building your brand? I would love to know from this audience. Raise of hands, please. Awesome. I'm just so proud to see so many of you raising your hands, but still about 6 or 7 people in the group of 110 that we have. So obviously an opportunity for us to start thinking about how we're going to build our brand. The next one is investing in yourself. This is extremely important. Every day, I take out 30 minutes to learn something new. And it's not just about something that relates to my work. It's also about anything new that's going on in the industry nowadays. I would like to keep up. So 30 minutes every day. My family knows this is an expectation that I've set up with my family members, with my kids. Every day, Mama is going to be unavailable for these 30 minutes because she really needs to spend time in learning something new. And my kids have seen that for years now. So this is really important. You have to prioritize the skills that you want to learn and the skills that you want to develop. And here is one thing that I would say: start small, right? There's so many times women whom I coach, they want to go for a certification. And they would say, Rashim, I want to go for a DevOps certification. But I do not have, I look at the curriculum and it's like 8 months worth of work. And I don't have that kind of time right now. So I keep postponing it. And my response to them is, how about you start learning more about cloud computing then? Start small, start 30 minutes every day, but build it to that momentum. And this actually, investing in yourself is therapeutic in so many ways, at least for me. When I had my first child 13 years ago, I had severe postpartum depression. And I didn't know that I was dealing with postpartum at that time. I was constantly sad. I was in tears. The reality was that I had never had experience with kids. I used to run away when I had to ever babysit or even take care of my cousins who were little. So there was a sense of fear over there, but also, my days were 2-hour slots where I was just feeding the baby and changing diapers. And I thought I had no purpose left in life. And at that time, to deal with that, I decided to take PMP certification. It was something that I worked towards and I got it. And during that time, I realized how much preparing for that certification actually helped me deal with that depression and that sense of no purpose, if you will. And everybody's experience is different, but really since then, I've spent time investing in myself. Here are 3 easy things that I have for you. Fast Track Your Leadership Career. It's #1 Amazon bestseller. It's a story based on my experiences, and I share the template. There's a guided journal that goes along with it. I know some of the women leaders that I'm in touch with and have used this journal. They've gone through 4 or 5 of these journals in a year. So definitely something that you can leverage. Also, the EWOW 2023 Virtual Summit that's coming up. It's virtual. You'll get to hear from 20 plus leaders across the industry. There's awards as well that allow you to celebrate with other women leaders. And I think ELB is giving away 10 tickets today. So make sure that you put your name in and or send your request to Stephanie, and they'll be able to allocate tickets to you. But I invite all of you to join for the summit. And then finding sponsors. This is, if I had to pick one of my favorite things, this is probably one of my favorite things. I always say that women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. How many of you agree with it? Please raise your hands and tell me. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that counter going up, because the moment we join, even before we joined our first job, People tell us, you need to find a mentor, you need to find a mentor. And that's the area where we focus on. And we forget about finding sponsors. And the difference between mentors and sponsors is that a mentor actually talks about you, talks to you, and a sponsor talks about you in the closed doors where opportunities are being discussed. That's the biggest difference. So while you want people to tell you how to do better where you are, you want so many more people to actually open doors of opportunities for you. And that's where it becomes so important. So find your sponsors. How many of you have sponsors right now? I would love to see with the raise of hands over here. And now I see the number going down. So 5 of the 100 some attendees that we have actually have sponsors. Actually, no, 3. This is where you need to start working on. So let me tell you how to go about finding sponsors, because this is really important. When you start looking at your sponsors, you have to start looking at your immediate area of influence. So for example, if you are in a product team, who are the stakeholders that you work with the most? So you would say, if I'm product, I probably work with engineering. I probably work with business. There is probably some interaction with sales. And then there is interaction with customer success. So those are the 4 areas where you need to start building sponsors. When you start looking at sponsors, look at least 2 levels above you. And also, it's important to identify the power hierarchy in the organization. So, for example, if you are a fairly mature organization where the product is important, but sales kind of leads everything, then the power sits within the sales team. But if you are a technology company and you're constantly innovating and bringing more products, then engineering is the power center in the organization. So it's important to understand the power centers in the organization, and also knowing that every year as your organization evolves, that power center might move. So once you identify that, you identify 2 or 3 stakeholders within these organizations who could possibly be your sponsors. Oftentimes, I'm also asked, Rashim, do I need to have sponsors within the same company that I work or outside the company as well? And my answer to that is that you need both. At any given point in time, you need to have at least 4 to 6 sponsors, 50% of them outside your company and 50% of them within the company. And the reason behind that is, and I take a real life example, I was at an organization not too long ago where we were building a new product, and I was part of that new product. I had sponsors in that product line, but it so happened that the company decided that that product wasn't going to be successful, and they disinvested in that. And as a result, all my sponsors were laid off. When that happened, basically, if I wouldn't have had sponsors outside the organization, I wouldn't have been able to figure out an exit route for myself and still land in a good place with a nice company. So what's the best way to discover outside sponsors? The best way to discover outside sponsors is to look at movers and shakers in the industry, or people who are at least 2 to 3 levels up, who are on various boards, who work for different companies, high growth companies. Circle of influence is important. That's how you identify your sponsors. Then, how do you have the conversation with those people? A good way to do it for internal stakeholders, internal sponsors, is to send them an email when there is an event. For example, somebody released a new product line. You can reach out to them and say, hey, I noticed you released a new product. Congratulations on that. By the way, everybody loves to know that their work is making an impact, even leaders. So don't think that if you are going to send a congratulatory message, people will not notice it because everybody likes to be acknowledged for the work, and it doesn't matter where you are in the hierarchy. To be completely candid, it gets lonely when you are at a certain level. So leaders actually appreciate that. Send them a congratulations, say, I'm working on this. This is how I contributed to this product, or there might be an opportunity to collaborate over here. I would love to spend 10 minutes with you discussing, what strategies you're working on and how I can be of help. I did that very early on in my career when I reached out to a sales leader because I realized that the sales hierarchy, sales was the powerhouse in that organization. And I said, I have deep understanding of outsourcing. I have deep understanding of the vendors that we work with. How can I help you with the RFPs? And everybody needs help. Believe it or not, everybody needs help. The moment I sent that email, the person said, yes, I have a big RFP coming up with Microsoft. I would love your help. And then what you do is you pick up that assignment and you deliver extraordinarily on that assignment. The thing that you have to be careful about is low effort, high impact. Do not sign up for 2-year-long projects. That's not what your goal is. Your goal is short-term, 15 days, 20 days, but where you can show the biggest impact. And that's how I was able to show impact. And that's how I built that credibility with the sponsors. And then the sponsor was able to help me with my move from India to United States. And I tell this story often because we assume that we have to do a lot of work to be credible for our sponsors. What we forget is that sponsors, typically as you are a leader, your circle of influence is also important. You want to have 10, 15 people always in the background whom you can put in positions where it matters. Everybody would ask you as a leader, do you have somebody in mind who can be a fit for this role? And you want to be able to look at your network pool and say, yeah, I have the right person. So that's where sponsors are coming from. But they're also putting their credibility online when they recommend you. So you have to prove to them that you are credible and you're somebody who's going to deliver. So please do not, ladies, pick up a 2-year-long project with your sponsors and kill yourself in the process. Pick up low effort, high impact projects that will really demonstrate your superpower. And then also share your aspirations with your sponsors and say, keep your eyes and ears open, please. If opportunities arise, these are the 3 things that I'm interested in. Do not say, if you think that there is a right opportunity for me, please propose my name. No. You tell them what you want, and then you keep reiterating that. So that's the way you go about finding the sponsors. If they're outside the industry, set up a 15-minute, 20-minute call and talk to them. You want to also understand when you're finding sponsors that your values actually align with the values of the sponsor. I've met people whom I thought that they would be great sponsors for me, but as I talked to them, their values were very different from mine, and I don't know if I wanted them as my sponsors. So do not send an email that says, I would love for you to be my sponsor, because that's not how you want to start the relationship. You want to start the relationship with making sure and vetting these people if they are worth being your sponsors or not. So that's about finding sponsors. Please put all your questions in the chat and I'll take them up after we finish up with this, because I know you'll have a lot of questions. Last is building your support framework. This is so important because 20 years ago, when I thought about support framework, I thought about who is the person whom I can trust, whom I can share all the problems that I'm having at work. And this person can give me sane advice and can listen to me. Most often than not, that person was my mom. And then when she would give me advice, I would get frustrated because she had never worked in a corporate environment. And then I would blame her for not understanding what my situation was. But that was not because my mom shouldn't have been part of that framework, support framework. She is an integral part of that support framework till now. But I was not diversifying the support that I needed with the right kind of people. So now when I think about support framework, I think about it from a financial perspective. Do I have a team that can help me with my finances, with my caregiver duties? Do I have an intellectual framework, support framework, where I can bounce off my startup ideas or my product ideas with? Do I have somebody at work whom I can trust? Do I have people who can help me think about building my brand differently? So you have to really create those segments in your support framework and know that there will be different people in those segments. Most of the times we only think about our support framework in terms of who's going to pick up the kids, who's going to drop the kids, who's going to take care of the fur babies, who's going to take care of parents, and they're running their errands. We are a sandwich generation, so we need to take care of both our parents as well as our kids. Or who is going to, if I'm attending a conference, who is going to fend for dinner tonight? That's about it. We don't think about it from a perspective of, I have this bright startup idea. Who in my framework, support framework can help me take it to the next level? Whom can I bounce off these ideas with? Or do I have a coach who can help me get to the next level? We don't think about it. We don't invest in our support framework. And that is something that I want you to start doing to be able to get to that next level. So identify your superpower, use that superpower to build your brand, to find your sponsors, to build your support framework, because that's what is going to take you to the next level. So what are the next steps? I'll give you some easy steps. Identify your superpower. You can use Fast Track Your Leadership Career Guided Journal to reflect and to record your reflections, to think about superpower differently. Identify your sponsors. Set up virtual coffee chats with potential sponsors and expand your network. So many of you I saw are going to be at the EWOW 2023 Virtual Summit. Take time to connect with people, others who are attending, and join us to build your network. With that, I would, Stephanie, open up for any questions that we have from the audience.
Awesome. So yes, we do have a lot of interest in the EWOW Summit in the chat there, which is awesome. So I will be putting all of your emails into a list after the webinar. I'll use one of those random picker things, and I will email everybody who is part of the lucky 10.
And for others who do not make it, you can always go to the EWOW website and actually grab tickets.
Yes, I will add a link to the summit website in the email with the recording. So it'll be right there for you. All right, we do have, it looks like, here's a question. Is it a good thing to seek out sponsors who work in your industry at a company that you would want to be employed by in the future?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely, yes. And if you're really passionate about that company, make sure that you find at least 2 leaders in that company who can be your sponsors, because people change jobs and people move on. So if you're really, here is the interesting thing about your sponsor pool. You have to continuously look at your sponsor pool and identify whether these people are still people whom you want to have in your sponsor pool. So I know that a few times when I had my sponsor pool, people moved around. And they were good now, their new positions and what they were doing in their life. It was still valuable for me, but it was valuable for me to have them more as mentors rather than sponsors. So it's not a pool that you would build once and then just keep nurturing the same pool, but you have to also start looking at, is this pool still good for me?
Absolutely. And let's see, Emma is wondering if you have a list of the references for those stats that you shared at the very beginning of the
Yes,
webinar.
they are actually from McKinsey's report, and I can send the link to you, Stephanie.
Okay, perfect. I'll put that in the webinar recording email as well, which answers Andrea's question. Yes, I will be emailing out this recording to everyone. All right, let's see. keep on putting your questions in. We are getting a lot of comments about how helpful this was. It was refreshing and invigorating, lots of good information shared. So that is always fantastic to hear. We like to make sure that our attendees are getting some good stuff out of these sessions. And if there aren't any more questions, we can call it a day. Thank you so much, Rashim, for joining us today. This was a great session. The recording will be sent out by tomorrow. I'll get those links for everybody and I will inform the lucky 10 winners.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie and ELB, for having me today.